when you look at what SpaceX is doing in Starlink, specifically with the direct-to-cell program, we're planning to connect to unmodified handsets. So every cell phone that people have in their phone will eventually just connect to space. And it turns out connecting to an IoT device is even easier than that, because you typically have an antenna gain that's better and maybe more power. And it's actually, outside, not in a car, and all of those challenges. So I think, that is kind of this natural evolution where we're going to see connecting to even smaller, lower power, lower cost, maybe even COTS, IoT, cell IoT devices that are already deployed will be able to connect to those satellites.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast, the #1 publication and resource for the Internet of Things. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon. If you're watching this on YouTube, we truly appreciate it if you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you have not done so already. If you're listening to us on a podcast directory, please feel free to subscribe to get the latest episodes as soon as they are out, and it helps other people find it, which is fantastic for all of us. All right, on today's episode, we have Sara Spangelo, the former co-founder of Swarm and currently the senior director of satellite engineering at SpaceX. Swarm is a subsidiary of SpaceX. Their mission when they started was to connect people and devices from anywhere in the world at all times and at a low cost. And they are a super fascinating story and company. So we talk a lot about that at the beginning. We kind of jump in, talk about the founding story of Swarm. We talk about the satellite IoT and connectivity landscape, the value of low cost, ubiquitous satellite data services to enable a whole new range of IoT applications in a wide range of industries, which industries those are, what use cases are kind of leading the way, the future of this space. Sara is a fantastic guest with a very impressive background. I think you'll all get a lot of value out of this episode and really hope you enjoy it. But before we get into it, any of you out there are looking to enter the fast-growing and profitable IoT market, but don't know where to start? Check out our sponsor, Leverage. Leverage's IoT solutions development platform provides everything you need to create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT For All Podcast. Welcome, Sara, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Why don't you kick it off by giving a quick introduction about yourself to our audience?
Okay, sounds great. My name is Sara Spangelo, and I'm a previous aerospace and mechanical engineer. And about 6 years ago, I started a company with my co-founder, Swarm Technologies, and we launched really tiny satellite, literally this big, into space. We put up over 160 tiny satellites solving for IoT connectivity. And we grew that company for about 5 years, and then we were acquired by SpaceX about this time last year. And since that time, we've been continuing to grow Swarm at a very exciting rate, and then also supporting other programs within Starlink, specifically the direct-to-cell program. My co-founder and myself are the two co-leads of that program right now. And we're now part of that SpaceX family and continuing to support all sorts of activities at SpaceX and ultimately our mission there.
Fantastic. So when you started Swarm, what was that experience like? And I guess what I'm really asking is kind of what was the opportunity you saw kind of in the space, and what kind of prompted the development of this company?
Yeah, great question. So my co-founder and myself had seen lots of opportunities where there was kind of not an available low-cost IoT solution from space in different use cases. So I'd worked at JPL, where there were a lot of scientists that wanted to put sensors different places on the planet, whether it was the middle of the ocean, the North Pole, earthquakes, volcanoes, things like that. And there was just nothing that was really accessible and low cost ways of bringing data back from those locations. Similarly, my co-founder had a high altitude balloon company. So he was trying to fly balloons around the world and bring back valuable data about sensing or imagery in different applications. So we both realized, okay, there's a huge kind of gap here in low-cost IoT connectivity solutions from space. And then we both came from the CubeSat world. So I'd worked on small sats as part of my Ph.D., and that was becoming very popular in the 2010s. Companies like Planet Lab were coming along, doing imaging with small sats. And we were wondering if we could do something with small sats, but even at a smaller size, like maybe 1/8 or 1/16 or 1/4 the conventional size, the economics could be even more favorable. And we could launch many satellites, maybe tens of satellites for the cost of, earlier launching one satellite.
Right.
So our initial design was literally just a PCB, like one board, like kind of like what's in a phone, of a satellite. And there's no reason that couldn't be a satellite. We came up with a clever scheme for stabilizing it. And we had power and data and comms and antennas and all the things you need. And it was kind of a hobby, and we had been mentioning it to our flight instructor. We're both pilots and fly small planes. And she was encouraging us that, oh, this could be a company you should chat with VCs, venture capitalists in the Bay Area, which there's many. Made some intros, and we were lucky enough that Social Capital was interested in investing in us to the tune of about $3 million right off the bat. And that was early 2017. And we decided to leave our jobs. I was at Google, he was at Apple, and really start this company. And the rest is history.
That's fantastic. Awesome story. Yeah, that's very cool. Anytime you believe in not only yourself and the work that you do, but just like the technology and the vision you have, and able to take that risk, especially from what I imagine is a pretty good job at, some very prominent companies. It's an awesome story to hear about. So congrats on all the success so far. And it seems like there's a lot of exciting things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure we totally believed in ourselves, but it was kind of like, you don't do it now, you'll never do it.
Yeah,
gotta take a risk, gotta jump. And we figured stuff out.
Totally get it. Well, that's awesome. So let me ask you this then, from your perspective, tell me a little bit about how you kind of see the current landscape of satellite IoT and kind of satellite connectivity in the industry. Kind of where things are now, how should people be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen like incredible innovation over the past, 5 or 10 years with companies like Swarm, but there are others out there doing similar adjacent things where, because the form factor of the satellites have been getting smaller and the capabilities have remained about the same or increased, the launch economics and the company economics have been extremely favorable, where we can pass a lot of those cost savings down to the user. So instead of paying $100 a month, you can now pay like $5 a month and get a pretty similar type of service. And there's also been a lot of innovation just generally in the space with like our cell phones and other, battery technology, power technology, radio technologies. And the space component has been able to leverage a lot of that, which has been amazing. And I think we'll continue. I think we'll continue to see lower costs and higher data rates, lower power needs, smaller antenna form factors. And I see kind of a natural transition from, what we're doing with Swarm on the VHF side. There's other companies doing it, maybe UHF or SRL band, into what we're doing on the direct to cell side, which we're ultimately connecting to unmodified handsets that have very poor antennas, very low power. And there's a lot of synergies there with what you can do in the IoT space. In fact, connecting to an IoT device will be easier than connecting to a handset. So I see that natural evolution of maybe we're able to bring the price down another 5 or 10x and be able to continue connecting devices. So I think the future is very exciting on that front.
Yeah. It's been a hot topic recently. I mean, just so many companies, or I guess so many people I've been speaking with, have been just very excited to see the developments of the satellite IoT space, just from the capabilities that it potentially can provide for the industry. I mean, being able to provide low cost connectivity and such is just could be a very big game changer, especially for a lot of use cases that have struggled with the current connectivity offerings in the market. So let me ask, how do you kind of see, or what do you see as the biggest values of low cost, ubiquitous satellite data services for the industry as a whole? I mean, I know at least on one side it's going to enable a whole new range of applications, but just from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest values of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to what you hit on there. We see, at least for Swarm, there's kind of two types of customers. There's the customers that were previously paying Iridium or Orbcomm these really high fees because, frankly, they had oil and gas that was so valuable that they were willing to pay $100 a month to monitor it. And they're switching over to Swarm because of the cost savings, and the use case is still satisfied with what we can provide. That's kind of the obvious customer switch. We're also seeing people that could previously never afford satellite, which is kind of what you were hinting at, that can afford it for the first time. So they're coming over from just terrestrial systems. Maybe they were using LTE or LoRa solutions or Sigfox or Zigbee or one of those types of solutions. And for the first time, they can afford satellites. So they're coming over. And I think that's the more exciting shift, because that's allowing them to expand their businesses beyond where those other technologies can reach, which is typically, tens or hundreds of kilometers to literally the whole globe. And I think that companies are now able to monitor things, even if they're out in the middle of the ocean, which was previously completely unreachable. A farm field that's very far away. Certain
Right.
countries have very poor cell connectivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been seeing a lot of kind of talk about how to kind of work with existing connectivity options like cellular, LPWAN solutions, things like that to increase coverage for certain use cases, certain areas of the world, things like that, which is very interesting. What industries and what use cases do you think are going to not only benefit from the satellite connectivity the most, but also kind of lead the way as this continues to become more of a prominent connectivity type for the industry?
Yeah, so we see a lot of use cases in the environmental monitoring space and really expanding with Swarm's offering. And this is like near and dear to people's hearts because, we have horrible forest fires here in California and around the globe. So we have one company, Dryad, that's doing forest fire detection, which I think is really exciting. And they're able to put sensors out in remote locations, detect fires earlier on, and send resources to stop those fires before they spread. And that's actually a
Mm,
huge impact to climate as well.
sure.
Um, and then other exciting ones, one company we work with called Rainforest Connection is monitoring rainforests for illegal logging. So it has a pretty
Sure.
simple acoustic sensor and it can help stop illegal logging. So those are probably like the feel-good use cases, but I think also have the potential to be really impactful. We
Yeah.
also see quite a lot in the energy space. So whether that's oil and gas to a certain extent, but also solar, wind, I think we're going to see more hydro with Starlink type solutions come online. And that can be
Hmm.
great because we can make sure that those power generation plants and technologies are being really well utilized and very efficient. And we're not having to send somebody out in a truck for a 4 hour
Right.
journey to go do something.
Right. Right.
Um, there's a lot of exciting other ones. Beehive detection is a big one. A lot in the agriculture space as well. I really think the sky's the limit in terms of these use cases, and
Sure.
yeah, excited to be chatting with you, and hopefully some of the people listening can think of how this is applicable to their use cases as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's, like you said, the sky is really the limit when it comes to this connectivity um, technology in the space. And just, we've had a lot of different connectivity technologies that have existed for a while, that have grown, that have matured and provide a ton of value to the industry. And I think the more connectivity types that are available, the more opportunity the industry has to really see successful deployments launched and utilized by more people. And I think that, as a whole, at least how I view it, is one of the biggest contributors to the overall success of the industry long term, is seeing more
Mhm.
successful deployments. And a lot of the issues companies run into is around connectivity in rural areas, or just situations where connectivity isn't as strong, and they go in and out of connectivity, so they lose value, like in supply chain and other types of asset tracking applications. So
Mhm.
um, it's a super fascinating kind of space to pay attention to, and it really, I think, is driving the viability of a lot of the use cases that we have talked about for many years, but maybe have not necessarily been as highly adopted because of lack of a mature enough of a connectivity option to make it worth the ROI for a company.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
What so from your perspective, what do you kind of see the future looking like? Like where do we go kind of from where we are now? I know we're still in the kind of, I don't want to say too early days, but we're still in the early days when it comes to satellite connectivity being utilized in the IoT space. But just from your perspective, the company's perspective, a lot of things that you've probably seen on your own side, what does the future of this space look like? Not just IoT, but also the connectivity space, the satellite IoT side. Just what is it that you think we should really be paying attention to or getting excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the past like maybe 5 or 10 years, we've seen a pretty dramatic evolution in the types of connectivity, but also imaging and SAR and other things we can do from space. And then also the IoT solutions have been getting basically cheaper, smaller, lower power, easier to integrate and deploy. And then obviously achieving this global coverage with the satellite solutions. So I think we're going to continue to see an evolution in that trend. I think when you look at what SpaceX is doing in Starlink, specifically with the direct to cell program, we're planning to connect to unmodified handsets. So every cell phone that people have in their phone will actually just connect to space. And turns out connecting to an IoT device is even easier than that because you
Yeah,
typically have an antenna gain that's better and maybe more
sure.
power. And it's actually outside, not in a car, and all of those challenges. So I think, that is kind of this natural evolution where we're going to see connecting to even smaller, lower power, lower cost, maybe even COTS, IoT, cell IoT devices that are already deployed will be able to connect to those satellites. And because those satellites are very efficient, they're doing broadband and direct to cell. They're serving huge markets. They're very large. They're very capable. The cost can come down even more. So I think we're just going to see a natural evolution. And, I think in 20 years, how we go in and out of like cell and Wi-Fi and don't really think much about it. I think that as devices move, in and out of cell and satellite and Wi-Fi, they're not going to think much about it. And hopefully it's very seamless. And we kind of take connectivity for granted. I think that's going to be the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we'll be thinking about it in a different way, just as we've seen it with other connectivity types for sure over the years. So, but it's very very exciting space to pay attention to. What are some of the challenges you see with this space? Like you talked about the antenna piece a second ago, for IoT devices versus like the handhelds and such. But just generally speaking, what are some of the bigger challenges you've seen when it comes to satellite IoT? Maybe whether it's the deployments, adoption, um, integration. Like what are some of the things that really stand out to you that you've kind of noticed that it's worth our audience understanding that there are still challenges out there, and here's where they really rely? Is it more around hardware? Like just kind of what do you think on that front?
Yeah, I think, whenever someone is considering a switch, that's usually pretty painful because it's, engineering and business resources to go and evaluate if that switch is going to be kind of worth its ROI.
Yep.
So that's one aspect. Like if they're very happily using cell and thinking of switching over to satellite, that's a pretty big consideration, especially for a small company. And then along those lines, physically integrating our modem into their solutions can also be an engineering effort. We try to make that really seamless, and we've seen people do it in weeks, but more likely it takes months to kind of get that piece fully integrated, because they're basically taking our modem and integrating it into a third-party device, replacing Iridium or a cell chip that they had previously. One way we've tried to overcome this, you mentioned asset tracking earlier. We actually just released a standalone asset tracker, which just works out of the box. So literally out of the box, stick it to the side of a vehicle or a crane or a van or anything really, trailer, whatever you want to track. And you can track that for $5 a month, and that's $99. So that's extremely competitive in this space. And I think a trend towards integrated solutions that are affordable, easy to integrate, easy to set up, will help alleviate some of that friction that we've been seeing.
Yeah, definitely. That's fast. That device sounds great. Where are you seeing it kind of used the most right now?
I mean, largely in the logistics space, no surprise there.
Yeah.
Some in the construction and energy space. So it turns out there's a lot of like bobcats and cranes and trailers that just like sit for big portions of the year, and then people kind of forget where they were, and then people want to move them, and making sure that we know where they are for insurance purposes or safety. But that's a new product, so honestly, we're still really exploring that space and excited to see what people will use it for.
Yeah, I'll say anything on logistics asset tracking that you can develop that makes it more cost effective and easier to adopt for different types of asset. Obviously, I know there are limitations depending on the type of asset, where it's going, what it's doing, what data is needed. But even even at a fundamental level, there's a lot of demand in that space for a lot of things. And then when you get into, I know it's tough because indoor and satellites, but indoor tracking is a big one. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what you all are able to develop and keep and continue to launch around logistics and asset tracking space. Just because it seems it's one of the areas that I think adoption has jumped up so much, because it's a way for people to really understand what it is, and it's more it's an easier problem for them to attach to and look to solve, as some of the other use cases that I've seen in other industries take a little bit more understanding as to how it's going to work, what it's going to do, rather than just saying, yes, we can tell you where your assets are, we can track what they're doing, we can pull X data off of it and give you reports so you can kind of see it and manage it from there. I think it's a great space to be in, and I'm very excited to kind of see how it continues to grow.
Yeah, me too.
So the last thing I want to do before I let you go here is I know we talked about kind of the future of the space and so forth, but just from your perspective and what you have going on at Swarm, SpaceX, and so forth, what are some of the things that our audience should be on the lookout for? Kind of new and exciting things that are coming out that we should just kind of just be paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Starlink is super fascinating. We're releasing new products all the time. You'll see some aviation products coming out this week for aircraft, but there's a lot of other things you can do with Starlink, both on the consumer side, the RV product, but you can also use that at cabins and things like that. But you're going to see more around like what we can do in the energy space and many other verticals. So kind of stay tuned. That website gets updated and it's pretty exciting. There's also usually news articles because
Okay.
anything Elon SpaceX gets in the news pretty easily. So
Oh, it does. Yeah.
that's a good way to see it. I think on the Swarm side, obviously we have our asset tracking product. Along with that, we do have like a UI where you can actually see the movement and tracking of vehicles, and we'll have some additional enterprise kind of software solutions, which are really useful for companies that have to aggregate tons of data and make sense of it all. And then I think the next exciting thing, at least from my perspective, is the direct to cell program. We're hopefully going to be flying our first satellites around summer, fall of next year, and offering services probably late 2023, early 2024 in beta. Obviously partnering with T-Mobile in the US and many other telcos around the globe. And I think that will be really exciting for the consumer markets, obviously connecting to handsets and doing texting to start, voice and data later on, but also the IoT space, like I described, and that's coming up pretty soon. So we're really excited for what we're going to be able to achieve with all of those programs.
That's awesome. Yeah, very exciting. Thank you so much for taking the time. This has been one of my favorite conversations of recent.
Thank you.
This the more conversations I can have around the satellite IoT space the better it is. And your story is super fascinating, and a lot of very exciting things have happened, and I feel like will happen with all the things you have going on, not just with Swarm, but also on the SpaceX side. So really appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with me and our audience, and hopefully we'll find an opportunity to have you back and talk further.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ryan. Have a great day.
You too. All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching that episode of the IoT For All podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification so you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.